the idea that you're not free to criticize Israel is a threat to free speech in the United States. It's a threat to fundamental liberal values. And this is a terrible thing.
So recently, John Mearsheimer was on Glenn Greenwald's podcast talking about how U.S. policy toward Israel, especially as it relates to Gaza and the recent war with Iran, affects our policy domestically. Is the Israel lobby losing ground because of that? Are there other ramifications? Well, let's listen to him because he's the literal author of the book on the Israel lobby. He wrote the book, The Lobby with Stephen Walt. Excellent book. Let's watch. Let's react to what he has to say. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
My perception is there's a lot more space now in the discourse for not just space, but people are using that space to now really keep asking, like, wait a minute, why are we just always talking about Israel? Why are our politicians so devoted to Israel? Why is our foreign policy shaped around Israel? Why do we accept censorship for them? Why do we go to wars for them? And a lot of people who even 2 years ago were afraid to say it are now saying it quite vocally. Do you think that has been a significant change and improvement in terms of the ability and willingness, even of American politicians, let alone just ordinary Americans, to raise these kind of questions? When you wrote your book, there was no space practically. You created that space, but it took up until now for it to really people to get comfortable and have it be almost mainstreamed.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. You want to remember, we published the book in 2007, and the article was published in the London Review of Books in 2006, and that's approximately 20 years ago. So a lot of time has passed, and over the passage of those, 19 or 20 years, a lot's happened to make people aware of what the lobby is up to. And I would argue that what's happened since October 7th has made it manifestly clear to huge numbers of people what the lobby is all about and how it really perverts American foreign policy in ways that are not in the American national interest. And let me make two additional points about that, Glenn. One is you want to understand that defending Israel has become increasingly difficult for the lobby. And they therefore have to play smash mouth politics, and they have to do it in a very public way. So people now see the lobby in operation, engaging in smash mouth politics, smearing people as anti-Semites, calling Jews even anti-Semites or self-hating Jews.
This is so true. They do this even to Norm Finkelstein and Dave Smith and Max Blumenthal and Jeffrey Sachs and Aaron Mate and all these Jewish dissidents of Israel and of U.S. policy toward Israel, constantly funding it, getting involved in its wars, etc. I completely agree with what these two men align on in terms of this being more openly talked about. I've never seen a time in my lifetime where people feel more freely to criticize Israel, but it's only usually in the dissident space. It's not in the mainstream media. It's not in either of the political parties outside of a few outliers like Thomas Massie and Ilhan Omar and people like that. But this is becoming more prevalent in online discourse. And I think it's a result of the rise of the independent media, which, again, isn't all critics of Israel. There's plenty of Zionist alternative media to some extent. But there are more pronounced views that are being, boiling to the surface of our political spectrum in ways I've never seen. And I see it on the right, especially much more than I've ever seen in terms of this war in Iran, the genocide in Gaza, the aid that's going to Israel, what Thomas Massie has done in exposing AIPAC. You really see it now. And he's right. They're playing smash mouth politics. That's what we get, Critics of Israel are innately called anti-Semites. I know a lot of dissidents watching this will have had that experience, and that's just the way it is, regardless of, how many Jews you pay attention to that are also critics. I mean, there are plenty of Jews that hate these policies, and rightly so, just because they have a conscience too. And they're seeing this stuff for what it is.
In ways that, sort of cut against the way we're supposed to operate here in the United States. And this has done great damage to the lobby. There's no question about that. The second point I would make to you, there's a domestic dimension to this, and that has to do with what's happening on college campuses, right? You had all these protests against the genocide in Gaza. And these were people who were legitimately protesting the Gaza genocide. And what happened was they were tarred and feathered as anti-Semites. Many of them were deported, put in jail. This is ludicrous. You know, I spent my life in academia, and up until October 7th, nobody ever talked about anti-Semitism in academia. The idea that Harvard and Columbia had an anti-Semitism problem is laughable. I mean, if you look at who the presidents of these institutions have been over time, who the provosts and deans and department chairs
And
are.
donors.
And donors, I mean, you know, huge numbers of Jews occupied these institutions, which in my opinion, and I want to be clear on this, was a wonderful thing, right? But there was no anti-Semitism problem. I never once.
Yeah, and it seems like the anti-Semitism problem has been an outgrowth of supporting outrageous policies and doubling down on the massacre in Gaza and all the innocents it's killed. What do you think it's going to do to people that are kind of sitting on the fence or looking from the sidelines and seeing what's happening? Is it that they think they'll be happier toward people doubling down on that, saying it's a good thing and saying, you know, every Palestinian child is our enemy? As Moshe Feiglin recently said, as Brian Mast, the elected U.S. congressman, said, there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian. Do you think that's going to look good? Do you think that's going to decrease the potential for anti-Semitism to come about? Do you think calling people anti-Semitic just for levying legitimate criticisms toward Israel is going to decrease or increase the amount of anti-Semitism that breaks out? I have my answer. I think it's going to increase it. And I think that's what we're seeing. And a lot of it is due to the rise of independent media. Musk's purchase of Twitter has allowed people to be pretty critical of Israel. There is anti-Semitism. You see it, but it's often countered with people that say, hey, you idiot, look at this Jewish guy that is talking about these things in the same way that, you know, Christians or people of other faith criticize Israel on. You know, you see that come to the surface in ways we've never seen before. I think it's healthy to talk about these things. For really the first time in my lifetime, U.S. policy to Israel was something that was mostly just taken for granted by both sides of the political aisle for essentially as long as I can live, with, again, a few exceptions: Jim Trafficant, Ron Paul, Thomas Massey, a few others. But it's not as prevalent to even talk about it as it is now. I think it's a genuinely good thing, and people are seeing through this. I think dissidents especially see how it's wrong when you just leap to the anti-Semitic card whenever Israel's criticized.
Ran into anyone talking in anti-Semitic terms. It just didn't happen, right? But all of a sudden, after October 7th, these places became hotbeds of anti-Semitism. And these people who were out there, many of them who were Jews, right, who were protesting the genocide in Gaza, were tarred and feathered. And everybody understands what's going on here, right?
Yeah, you absolutely do. The usage of that term has just skyrocketed since October 7th, and I think we all know why. It's because Israel was criticized for how they followed up the policy. It wasn't proportionate at all. This is not even a war. It's not a war against Hamas again, or at all anymore. Hamas hasn't even fired a rocket into Israel since April, and before then, those strikes were sparing. This is a decimation campaign designed to wipe the Palestinians out of Gaza, replace it with a greater Israel experiment in which Gaza is completely taken over again by Israel, like before 2005. And then there are concentration zones, one of which they'll be clear about this, that they want to build in Rafah. So they see what's happening here. And they also want to expand their West Bank settlements. They also lay claims to parts of Lebanon and Syria. That's the truth here. People are seeing it, and it's no coincidence that, you know, the usage of accusing people of anti-Semitism has skyrocketed since October 7th.
Everybody understands that what's happened is that the lobby has moved in and they want to shut down criticism of Israel. And the way they're shutting down criticism of Israel is they're using what Steve and I called in the book the great silencer, which is the charge of anti-Semitism. So these protesters of genocide were all of a sudden turned into raving anti-Semites. Again,
even though there was a big Jewish contingent in all of those protests, campus protest movements as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. But I would just say to you, you go to a college campus, you're dealing with people who have IQs that are up in the 120, 130, 150 range, and they can figure out very quickly what's going on. This is very bad for the lobby, right? It's very bad for the lobby. And I'm just saying to you, don't lose sight of this dimension in addition to the smash mouth politics that's being played vis-a-vis Israel's foreign policy. And I would add, my final point on this is that I think if you look forward, if you look at what's going to happen in the months and years ahead, I think the lobby is going to have to be out in public, engaging in these kind of despicable ways for the foreseeable future for the purpose of defending Israel. And this is now reaching the point, this is what you were getting at, where so many people understand what's going on that it probably will hurt the lobby.
Yeah, I think I agree with this. The lobby is going to be upfront and personal with people in a way that they've never been before. You already see this. It's going on, the smash mouth politics he's talking about, levying accusations of anti-Semitism, even toward people that aren't. I mean, don't get me wrong, again, it does exist, but a lot of it is just levied and thrown out there, spaghetti to the wall, against people that just criticize U.S. aid to Israel. And I would like to think that this is going to shape our politics in a better direction when it comes to stopping the aid to Israel and stopping the tying of America's foot to the waist of Israel. But I don't know. I think that if this happens culturally and we keep talking about it and we keep raising these concerns, maybe it will eventually manifest in political trajectories that are better, that do lessen the amount of influence that Israel has over the United States, the amount of aid the U.S. goes to Israel. We haven't really seen that play out politically yet. We certainly haven't recently. If anything, the war with Iran shows to the extent to which the United States is still intrinsically linked with Israel, and it is because of all the aid. I mean, to the extent that Trump was willing to undermine his original foreign policy goals for the sake of what Netanyahu wanted. He wanted to negotiate with Iran, negotiate a deal, which I believe started earnestly, and then he intentionally tanked that to support the bombing campaign against Iran. You can say, no, that happened because Iran stalled the negotiations, but they didn't change anything related to the negotiations. It was the U.S. that did. The U.S. went from, in May, late May, we don't want them to have a nuclear weapon program, to early June, they can't enrich uranium at all, and that's a non-starter. They have a nuclear energy program. So he's totally right. Let's see how this manifests. But I would like to think that the Israel lobby is losing power just because of the education campaign that's happening. And hopefully that's a catalyst to change the culture in a better direction. If you're a dissident, anti-war activist, or a political, independent that doesn't want to fund Israel to the brim.
And will hurt Israel in the long term.
One of the ironies of it is, a major grievance of conservatives over the past decade. Arguably their principal one, but certainly one of the top grievances that conservatives were voicing is that what liberals do, Democrats do, in order to shut down debate is they call people racist, they call people misogynist, they call people homophobic, transphobic, etc., as a way of smearing them and preventing any kind of dogma from being questioned upon pain of standing accused of being a racist. And I think there was an immediate backlash to that, or not immediate, but certainly over time, that not only made that tactic less effective, but it also drained those terms of their sting. I mean, if you overuse it, if everybody's a racist the minute you disagree with the Democratic Party plank, then people are going to get to the point where they're going to say, I don't think this term matters that much. And it seems to me like nobody has done more to trivialize the term anti-Semite or anti-Semitism, or actually to drain it of its capacity to be a great silencer, more than the people who have just almost gotten hysterical and desperate, seeing these polling numbers change, seeing these questions being raised about Israel, to now just start almost hysterically and manically branding everyone an anti-Semite. Like, that's going to create a lot of resentment, but also weaken their primary tactic.
Yeah, I could not agree with Glenn more. This is an incredible point. When everyone's a racist, no one's a racist. When everyone's an anti-Semite, no one's an anti-Semite. So I see this word going the way that did. And he's right. It trivializes the word, because people, think twice when they hear that word now. They think that, well, are they really racist, or is this just one of those, stupid woke tactics that's adopted to suit the needs of stopping conversation and stopping discourse and debate around these subjects? And I think more and more people are waking up to the fact that it is that. It's just so ironic that, the right and, the Zionist right especially has, adopted completely the tactics of the liberal wokesters that use this to shut down conversation when it came to, realities regarding gender and things like that. Or the second you have a problem with the Democratic platform, as Glenn said, you're a sexist. And you really see that playing out here too.
Absolutely. And you don't want to lose sight of the fact that all of this behavior, including the complaints of conservatives about, the attacks on free speech before October 7th, that all of this behavior undermines free speech. And in a liberal democracy like the United States, which we all love, it's very important that these fundamental values not be undermined. The idea that you're not free to criticize Israel is a threat to free speech in the United States. It's a threat to fundamental liberal values.
And think about this. You're free without kind of the typical rejoinder that you're anti-Semitic to criticize individual American states. The left and right both has done this in the past. Just a few examples. Some states might have far stricter abortion laws than others. They do now since Roe versus Wade got overturned. You can boycott those states individually and not be called, a xenophobe or, a geographist or whatever word that they come up to say, you're being, a hateful bigot. You can do that. You can boycott individual American states. But if you boycott Israel, you're an anti-Semite. What does that say about who controls our politics and who we can criticize? There's that quote, from Voltaire. I don't even know if he actually said this or not, but, those who rule over you, you know who that is? Those that you're not allowed to criticize. And I think there's some truth to that, certainly so. If it wasn't Voltaire, let me know in the comments who it was. But yeah, that is playing out here.
This is a terrible thing, but this is where we are. There are just so many things that you can't talk about anymore on college campuses. People look over their shoulder when they talk about all sorts of issues. It has to do with black-white relations, affirmative action, Israel, Palestine, and so forth and so on. This is a terrible situation. We should be free to, have an open discourse about these matters. But that's not where we are today.
Yeah, I agree. I largely agree with what both men said about this. I don't think it's so much that the Israel lobby is losing ground or losing influence, losing power or control, especially over our politicians. But culturally, you do see an awakening of sorts. They are being forced to change their tactics in a way. As Mearsheimer put it here, they're playing smash mouth politics. That's what we're up against right now. That's what dissidents have to deal with. We have to keep our heads in the game and realize that, they don't have control over our lives. We should herald and, continue to praise the value, the virtue of free speech and what that means. And it means being able to be critical of our leaders. It's not even necessarily criticism toward Israel, though, I'm a critic of Israel. I have no problem with criticism toward Israel. But more closely connected to us is how our government treats Israel and our policy toward Israel. And what we've seen, in my lifetime is they get about as much money as they want. The U.S. gets involved in essentially whatever wars that they want. We overthrow the regimes of basically everyone that they want with so far like one counterexample, which we got about this close to overthrowing over the last week, by the way. But Iraq and Syria and Libya and, Iran now, we're basically in the Middle East for the purpose of that entangling alliances. And it's never, been good for the United States. It's not been good for the taxpayer, and people are awakening to that. There is a great awakening when it comes to Israel criticism. I think that's a good thing. But the lobby isn't quite losing ground. You see how much control it has, not only over Republicans, but Democrats, how much, politicians of both sides even boast about like how pro-Israel they are. We even saw that in 2024. Trump was out there boasting about how, no one came to the White House more than Sheldon or Miriam Adelson. And I gave them even more than they wanted. I've given Israel more than they wanted. Trump's even said several times on the campaign trail, make Israel great again. Well, that's what we have to deal with. And there has to be a cultural awakening to precede a political shift in that direction, a political sea change. I think Andrew Breitbart was so right when he says that politics is a follower from culture. What happens in the culture will eventually affect the politics. And I think there's truth in that. I think that might play out when it comes to Israel policy, but we'll just have to see. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Do you think I'm missing anything? Do you think these guys were right on the mark? Is the Israel lobby losing power? Are they showing more desperation? What is it going to take for them to lose their stranglehold over American politics? Let me know down below. Please do subscribe to Glenn Greenwald. He's awesome. Subscribe to my channel and like this video as well. And please consider becoming a YouTube member or a Patreon patron to support my channel. I'd very much appreciate that. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.